Welcome. Today, I am privileged to have the opportunity to be joined with Josh Anderson from Nashville. And Josh and I are going to be talking today about how he sold $135 million in real estate in 2020, which is pretty amazing because I heard there was like a pandemic or something during that time. So that's pretty awesome. So Josh, welcome. Excited to be able to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So you're the owner of the real estate consultant group, Anderson Group.
Yep.
And I know that you've served 8 years in the Army. Thank you for your service, and spent 10 months of that in Afghanistan for Operation Enduring Freedom. And so, Josh, welcome to the show, and tell us about yourself. Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. So, I'll just kind of jump in from the start and give you a digested version. I originally from Nashville, grew up in Louisiana, graduated from LSU and moved back. So I graduated in finance and economics, worked at an investment bank, and I think I had an idea in my head of what finance was going to be. And I created a different story in my head than what it actually was. So I ended up getting into real estate in April of 2006. I started with Keller. I've been with them 15 years later. I sold 23 or 24 houses my first year. It was like 3.5 million in volume, and just kind of grew like 50 to 100% each year for like the first 5 or 6 years. Started building a team in late 2010. Kind of fast forward 2019, we crossed over kind of that 100 million mark. And then 2020, we were all good and prepared. We had a tornado here in Nashville the week before the pandemic started.
Oh, goodness.
So we were busy. And then the pandemic happened, and so most of our businesses past some kind of referral, past clients, database, word of mouth. And so we do a lot of client events. Well, that all went out the window for 2020, obviously.
Yeah.
And it was pretty scary, just, for obvious reasons, but we had everything so planned out, and obviously that put a huge wrench in everything. And, but we worked extra hard, and it ended up being a really good year. The first thing I did was I was cutting expenses and
cut.
Yeah.
I need to get rid of it.
Yeah. I just didn't know what the next 3, 6, 12 months was going to look like. And it ended up being fine, but it also that made me realize there were things that we were paying for that we didn't really need. So that piece of it was good, but I think what made the 2020, the year, a little bit easier was our business is always it's been pretty steady. And so being able to consistently make the phone calls and check in with all of our friends and clients made it easy, because we had been kind of conditioned to do that the whole time.
So you didn't really change much except cutting the unnecessary expenses. Pretty much the only thing you changed. And the client appreciation events. Did you do those virtually?
We did some virtually. We ended up kind of shifting over to giveaways more than any client events. So
okay.
Mother's Day, we did giveaways, and Father's Day, we did giveaways, and just different. We partnered with a lot of restaurants.
Sure.
That I did videos with, and then we do like a $50 or $100 giveaway for some of my clients that own pizza joints or coffee shops or things like that. So we kind of on the fly did some of that stuff, and then we did some bigger things that were like scavenger hunts that were like big giveaways. So
that's cool. So yeah. What does your team look like today? What's the organizational structure of your team?
Yeah, so we have 15 people on the team. We've got myself. I'm still in production. I do primarily the listing side of the business, and then director of operations, transaction coordinator, listing manager, director of marketing. We've got inside sales, and then we've got a couple of virtual assistants in the background. So that's kind of the administrative side. And then we've got 2 senior agents that have been with me for about 10 years each. And then we've got 3 or 4 other, kind of regular buyer agents. And then we've got some junior agents and showing agents.
How many agents altogether?
So we have right now. So we've got 10 agents total,
including yourself.
Yeah.
Got it. And so, would you consider yourself sort of like the CEO and the listing agent and maybe even director of sales. Would that be true?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Too many
And
hats.
I got you. I can understand that story myself. I also had those three roles.
Yeah.
Do you have plans to elevate any of those out of your world, or are you happy with, with that structure?
I think that, building out the ISA department, kind of inbound and outbound, has been somewhat of a challenge.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that don't love the idea of being on the phones all day. We interviewed somebody last week, and she said, "Yeah, I just don't really want to make phone calls." I was like, "Okay."
That's a disqualifier for an ISA. Is that what I understand you say?
It's like, that's going to probably cut you out of this position. And then, just replacing myself as a listing agent, I'd like to be able to spend more time just doing business development, bringing in business,
Sure,
out shaking hands, and that's what I'm best at. And I'm not able to do enough of it when I've 3 or 4 other hats I'm wearing.
Yeah, I understand that. So I heard you say about the client care transaction coordinator. Did I hear you, or did I miss it? Do you have a listing assistant?
I do.
Okay.
I kind of call her a listing manager, listing coordinator.
Okay, listing manager. Okay.
Yeah. So she's licensed, and she helps me on some showings and things here and there, but she really is kind of taking it from the time we put it on the market. She's taking care of everything in the background.
Got it.
Yeah.
And is she partnering with the transaction coordinator as a part of that as well? And then you're getting involved as necessary?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fantastic. So I heard you say that a lot of your business now is coming from your sphere, from referrals, from past clients, et cetera. Walk us through that journey. So 2006, you were at that point hitting sort of the end of a top of a market, and then things, turn to the downside. Yep. So talk us back through those first couple of years. What did your sales business look like, say, in 2007 and 8?
Yeah. So looking back on it's really interesting because, so I had about a year and a half of seeing a good market before. I think September of 2007 was like the tip top pinnacle of that market. Yeah. And it kind of all went downhill from there. And I was so busy in the business that I knew there were mortgage issues. I knew people were getting all these crazy loans. But I had my head down, and I was just like so set on making contacts and setting appointments that I didn't realize how bad it was until like 2010. But I never really, I think a lot of agents get talked into being like, oh, it's a terrible market, so I'm just not doing very good. I kind of filtered all that out and just kept doing what I was told was boring but successful.
And what was that? What was boring and successful that you did during those years?
I think so. It's just the basics, and it's what I kind of coach and train our team on is, it's having a database and adding to it every day and every week, adding value to it, calling it. It's kind of jab, punch. Add value, and then you can ask for business. It's knowing your scripts, and I know scripts is kind of a dirty word. I just tell people, like, you've probably had thousands of conversations in your life, and you've never had to do it from a business purpose, and so. To me, a script is kind of a skeletal outline of this conversation, and it's the better questions you ask, the better answers you get. And so I don't think we were programmed or taught to ask really great questions. You just kind of ask, and it's so interesting if you just ask it a little bit different, how much differently packaged it is and how different of an answer that you get. So
can you give us an example?
I don't have one off the top of my head. I think I think a lot of times it's, I'll think of one, but it's.
I know I threw you on the spot there. So.
No, it's good. I think a lot of times agents are like, for example, calling a seller, and they go, I don't want to sell right now. And they're like, okay, I'll call you in 6 months. Instead of saying, well, would you be willing to buy at this price, another unit in that development, and just kind of working different angles and asking more questions instead of stopping, when they say no. Instead of just pushing a little bit harder and seeing what other angles you can work from. The other piece is just like, besides your sphere, picking 1 or 2 lead generation sources, whether it's door knocking, open houses, expireds. I built my business on expireds. There really aren't any these days, but to me, those people had already raised their hand and said, I'm willing to pay X commission and I want to sell my house, which was a little bit different than a for sale by owner, which, they were kind of sometimes testing the water or didn't want to pay a commission.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is something similar to what I teach as well, which is get a long-term strategy, which is typically going to either be your sphere or a neighborhood, and or both, right? That neighborhood could be your sphere, and then get 1 to 2 short-term strategies, such as expires for sale by owners, internet leads, Facebook leads, whatever you want to do. And I believe you have to have both, particularly early in your business, because you have to eat today.
Yep.
And that long-term strategy, which you employed with being the sphere of influence, that feeds you for a lifetime, because as long as you're connecting with them regularly, adding value to their lives, contributing to them, they'll be able to, just like what you said, jab, jab, punch. They'll be able to, when you ask, after hitting value, oh, by the way, who do you know? They'll be able to reciprocate. Am I understanding everything you're saying correctly?
Correct. Yeah. And I also tell people, team and anybody that's asking, to me, lead generation sources are kind of like the chair that you're sitting in. It needs 3 or 4 legs. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit wobbly, and you can't rely on one. Like the sphere thing is great, but until you've built it big enough and done it long enough for them to really trust you to get consistent referrals, you need other pieces coming in to kind of add to that. And then the other stuff that I think agents don't want to know or they struggle with because they're so busy is, I think you've got to know your numbers. So like you need to know how many dials you need to make to get a contact, and how many contacts you need to set an appointment, and how many appointments you have to set to show. You just need, like in the first 3 years, I totally was like, whatever. I didn't do any of that. Because
you mean you didn't track is what you mean by didn't do any of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that like after a long day, the last thing was like, I need to know my numbers, but I figured if I made enough phone calls, then it would work itself out. And it did. But now, I really look at all the data and now that I have a team, and I want to know where we're getting the majority of our business so we can throw more money there or take money away over here. And then the last piece is probably the time blocking, and just, agents struggle with time blocking and preparing the night before. Like on Sundays, I spend an hour or 2 every Sunday kind of looking at my calendar for the week, knowing what appointments I have, and then just being able to block off, like every morning from 8:30 to 11:30, I lead generate, outbound only. It's just what I do. And it's all for me.
So outbound only. So if somebody that you're calling returns that phone call, do you answer or do you wait till 11:30?
If I know that I just called that person, then, and I recognize the number, then I'll answer it. But if it's just like, if it's an agent I'm doing a deal with, they're going to get a call back,
Sure.
in the early afternoon. Yeah.
What would you do, Josh, if today was day one in your sales business? Actually, it's probably not too much of a different environment than when you actually started.
Right.
Given the marketplace today, hopefully we don't have that same, massive correction as we did back in, 2007. What would you do today, Josh, if today was day one in your business?
To get now business
or whatever. Like today, you just got your license yesterday. Congratulations. Now what?
Yeah. So, I think it's drinking out of a fire hose. If it was day one and I was wanting to, whether it was joining an office or a team, I think a lot of people join teams and they look up and realize they might have joined the wrong team, or they joined a team too early, or so I think the very first things I would do. So I did 65 open houses my first year.
Okay.
I knew just from being in the office for a couple months that no agents that had their own listings wanted to do open houses on Sunday. And so I don't know that I closed very many deals from that many open houses, but I got really comfortable talking to complete strangers and seeing what questions worked and which questions didn't, and following up with them. And so I would do a combination of open houses. I did a lot of handwritten notes starting out. And then I got really involved in nonprofit and or community. So I didn't really have any money starting out. So I went online and looked at all these different events that I wanted to go to, but I couldn't really afford to go to because they were like
Sure.
40 or 50 bucks to go to a beer festival, whatever. And then so I would just go to the executive director or the co-chair and say, hey, can I volunteer for this event? Volunteer for an hour. And then I'd like just kind of stand next to the executive director because I said, I don't know anybody in town. Will you introduce me to people? And that's what they did. And that's how I added people to my database. And from the time I met them, I would just email them, say, hey, nice to meet you. Would you like to grab a cup of coffee?
So, Josh, that's interesting because that follows the same pattern of what we were talking about previously. Of course, your business has evolved, yet I just heard you say basically short-term strategy, I'm going to do an open house 65 in 1 year. Long-term strategy, I'm going to create relationships that I don't already have established. Here's one way that I could do that through the networking and through meeting the connectors. Smart move. And then asking those connectors. And I'm sure that you were probably also seeking how you could help those connectors as well. You know, when you're, I'm sure the question, how can I help you, was probably first and foremost out of your mouth when you were approaching them. Is that a true assumption?
Yeah. And it worked out because some of those people that I still stay in touch with them.
Yeah.
And even like my first listing I ever got was a for sale by owner, and I still stay in touch with him. I talk to him 3 or 4 times a year. Okay. and ongoing, that's, I think what I've done so well is, Jay Papazan and Gary Keller interviewed me on stage a couple of years ago, and they go, so what are you doing different? And I said, I just do what your book said to do, which is call my past clients 4 times a year. And I check in with them. I say, I think a lot of agents get caught up in like, what do I say after 3 years? It's kind of weird. Like I spent so much time with them while I was finding a property for them, and then I've kind of lost touch. And I think you just own it. Like, hey, we've lost touch. I've done a crappy job of staying in touch with you. I was in your neighborhood for a final walkthrough, and I just made me think of you and just wanted to check in and see how you're doing.
I love that advice, Josh. Another way that I also approach that as well, because you mentioned the client appreciation event. And so if you don't, if you haven't talked to somebody in 3 years, that's always a good way to re-engage in the conversation as well. Similar type thing. Hey, Josh, I was just thinking about you. I know we've lost touch, yet I'm doing a taco night over at my house next week. Love to, see you in the baby and the missus. And, I'd love to come on by, have some tacos, something like that as well.
And so that's kind of why we started doing our client events.
To give them a reason to call, right?
Yeah. So my agents they were kind of struggling with making the calls. And like, I said, okay, well, we'll just do, a big event quarterly. And that way you're touching base with them every quarter. Just a reminder, hey, we're having this, taco night next Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. And it was like an easy touch. And then if they show up, great. And if they don't, it was still a touch.
Absolutely. And you can also add on their Eventbrite touches, Google Calendar touches, emails, texts, et cetera, so that you can make 8 touches for one invitation, really. Mail something to their doorstep.
Yep.
So Josh, this is really great. I appreciate this. What would you say is the biggest mistake that you've made in business, or the most significant mistake that you've made in business? Or not even maybe a mistake, but just like the most negative consequence.
There's so many. I don't even know. No, I think when you get in this business, you try everything because everybody says, well, you just one sale pays for it for the entire year, right? For whatever it is. And I think I don't know if it's the biggest mistake, but the biggest aha for me was always kind of going back to my database and realizing our team, we're good at follow-up, but we're not like, we don't specialize in like internet leads. Mm-hmm. We can convert them, but with all the stuff that we do and getting, some of these teams that are getting 500 internet leads a month, back in the day when you could do the Craigslist ads and all that stuff. I mean, people were just producing, after a couple of years, it's like, okay, you have an extra 10,000 leads. Like, it's just bogging down the system. And so I'd rather quality over quantity, and I'd rather work with people that already know us, like us, and trust us. And so I've gotten away from that not away from it. I've tried to add in internet leads and other lead sources that we weren't in control of over time. And I've always gone back to, we're not the team that converts internet leads at a super high level. We're good at staying in touch with our database. And so that's not like a huge mistake, but they can be pretty costly mistakes every time you do them. Like every time you do a year's worth of Zillow. I mean, I have some friends that have teams. I mean, they've got their teams where they're paying $25,000 a month to Zillow, which is insane, but it works for them. It's just, to me, it's a huge risk for what the reward is, and it can be a great reward. I'd rather give that money to my database and love on my database and have a beer with people that we already are in business with.
Yeah, it's a hard investment too. I mean, shagging down Zillow leads is a lot harder than going to go have a beer with your buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So it's just a harder way to do business. I do both though. I actually balance, because today's Craigslist, and for those listening or viewing, when Josh is talking about the Craigslist strategy, years ago, you could advertise properties on Craigslist and link your URL to direct them to your site, pick up their information, and to be able to get that lead. Today's Craigslist would be really doing the same on Facebook, advertising a property on or a home on Facebook and capturing the lead in that sense. So that's sort of like the same strategy, just a different platform. So
yeah, you definitely have to have some of both for sure. I mean,
sure.
we're still doing some Facebook and Instagram, and we're playing around with all of our videos that we have on YouTube and trying to hack that. We've gotten really great traction on our reviews online, so Zillow and Google, and so.
How did you do that? How did you manage to get good traction on the reviews? Is there a system that you use for that?
It's a manual system. I mean, it's just,
that's what I mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are systems out there. I think for us, it was, we got really purposeful about Google reviews in 2018. And the reason I picked Google reviews was primarily because everybody was kind of on the Zillow train. And I just said, well, I think Google can buy Zillow if they want. And if they wanted to do away with their, reviews, they could. And I don't think anybody can really buy Google. They're just the beast, right? And the second largest search engine is YouTube, which they also own. And there's some overlapping analytics there. So we just started asking at the very beginning, our buyer consultation, all the way through past close, we ask for reviews. And if we're doing a great job, we shouldn't feel bad about asking for reviews, because that's how we build our business. And that's what we tell our clients, say, this is how we build our business.
So you felt more comfortable, or felt that you had more control outside of Zillow rather than within Zillow in regards to soliciting those reviews? I'm sure you have a ton on Zillow as well, though. Is that true as well?
Yeah, we have. We just didn't focus on it as much. Yeah. We have it on our website where somebody can go on and review us on any of them. I think the reason I started thinking about the whole Zillow thing was, and it's coming true, of they're becoming a brokerage and they can do away with our past sales and our reviews if they want, pretty easily. And I think they're already doing that in some areas. And people that have spent a ton of time and money and energy are getting pretty frustrated with that.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate circumstance. Yeah. Yet, what I hear you sharing, throughout this entire conversation is to be, you can't control if it's raining outside or not. What you can control is, are you going to bring an umbrella?
That's right.
And if it's raining outside, if you choose to be upset about it, then, that's probably not a wise use of energy. Right. So the reality of it is Zillow's going to do whatever Zillow's going to do. Yep. So what is Josh going to do? Josh's going to say, well, I'll go to Google. Yeah. Because, it's more protected, or at least you believe that it's more protected.
Feels that way so far. I'm sure they'll get in the game at some point.
That maybe so. Yeah. So 135 million in 2020. And that was up from 100 million the previous year. Is that what I heard you say?
Yep.
So I mean, when you hear those two numbers side by side, it doesn't, 135 and 100 seems sort of like the same number. Yet when you actually think about what you just said, is 35 million. That in of itself is a big number.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you were having this conversation with me right now, I say, hey, Dan, I had 35 million in sales last year. That in of itself would be impressive.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. So what challenges specifically did you have in that 35% growth in a short period of time?
I think the biggest challenges always in real estate is it comes down to who you're in business with. And like us being so busy in the transactions in 2020 that we didn't have the ability to necessarily kind of slow down and hire. I mean, and we did hire a few people, But when you're that busy, it's hard to add in the complete interviewing, hiring process, checking references, and all these things without cutting corners on it. And I think that's got to be the forefront if you're building a team anyway. It's got to be the forefront of like you're always looking for great people to be in business with. And so that was probably and still is kind of our ongoing challenge because our market's even crazier in 2021. I don't know we might be at 135 million. We might be at 150 million. I don't know how it's going to shake out. We started kind of slow. We're at the same year to date. We're at the same GCI goal. So that's just been the biggest challenge is like finding more people to get in business with that are people we want to be in business with. And so one of the things that we talked about earlier of like working with past clients and just going to grab a beer with them. One of my tests now is like, would I go have a beer with this person? Just for fun, just to hang out.
Do I even like them?
Right. And so, I kind of lump life into these three little categories of work, personal, and sleep. I mean, that's kind of 8 hours on each of those. And if I'm spending as much time with people at work as I do with my family, they got to be awesome.
So you break it into those third work, family, or work, personal, sleep. Are you disciplined on 8 hours a day? Do you work more than that? Does one flow into the other, or how's that look like?
No, I'm pretty. I've set my calendar up to where I'm pretty much home. I'm home almost always before 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Usually probably more like 3:30 or 4. And I'd almost rather do like, I don't work a ton on the weekends. If I work on the weekends, it's like I'm going to a listing appointment and then I'm done, or it's 2 listing appointments on Saturday and then I'm done for the day. So I kind of just have structured it. I don't want to be in traffic and getting home at 7 o'clock from listing appointments.
Do you find yourself in the later evenings, having to check emails, anything like that? Or are you 100% turned off?
I mean, I'll check some emails on my phone, but I'm not opening my computer. I'm just not. I've done it for so long that I think I'm just kind of like, I'll get up. I'll get up a little bit earlier and do it the next.
It will still be there.
That's right.
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. The idea of trying to like clean out my inbox, I've gave up on that a long time ago. So is what it is.
My aspiration is to keep it less than 50. I'm actually pretty good. I had a chiropractor appointment earlier today and I was there about an hour early. And just like you, I spend maybe a little bit different, but every Monday morning, I spend about 3 or 4 hours early in the morning getting ready for my week. Yeah. And I didn't wake up as early this morning as I normally do. So I got to the chiropractor's early and I'm on my computer. And by the time I saw him, I was less than 50 emails. And that to me is like, that's the biggest win of the week right there. Just get less than 50.
My wife can zero her inbox out. Mine's a disaster. So,
well,
yeah.
Hey, you know what? You have the right at 135 million to do whatever you want in your emails.
Thank you. Like it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So Josh, I know that you're always looking for talented people, and I know that you're looking obviously for home buyers and home sellers. So if you are, and I bet that you have a tremendous amount of opportunity for the right person within your organization, whether that be it as an inside sales agent or as a real estate agent, transaction coordinator, client care. How could somebody, if they're looking to expand their world and they're in the Nashville area, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to our website. So all of our career opportunities are on our website. It's just joshandersonrealestate.com. That's probably the easiest place to go look. That or find me on social. And I'm happy to give my email address.
Go ahead, throw it out there.
Yeah, it's just josh@joshandersonrealestate.com.
I think we can remember that. Josh@joshandersonrealestate.com. Sometimes it pays to have a simple name, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and it's not John Smith, right? It's somewhat unique, but it's simple.
That's right.
Well, Josh, I really appreciate your time today, and I wish you much continued success. Keep knocking out of the park and being an inspiration to all of us. And thank you, Josh, and I hope to be able to help you in some time as well.
Yeah, if you're ever in Nashville, give me a shout.
Let's do it. See you, Josh.
See ya.